The following program contains scenes and language of a frank and explicit nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to Film Jitsu, the podcast that wields films like deadly weapons. We are your hosts. I am Mike.
And I am Jay.
On this week's episode of Film Jitsu, Jason has to test his appetite with Sushi Girl, a 2012 crime movie. I think there's a lot of nudity. We're going to talk about, I guess. Who knows? I don't know. Jason might know. This episode's going to be full of surprises because after that, we're going to do our bottom 5 meals. I'm going to toss a surprise at Jason. Then I'm going to toss another surprise at Jason that we haven't even talked about.
What?
But before all that, let's go ahead and roll the trailer for 2012's Sushi Girl.
Tonight is the first night in 6 years that our boy Fish has breathed free here. I thought we might do something unique.
What is this?
You're welcome back, pilot.
I bet all of you went looking for those diamonds and found it.
I really wish it hadn't come to this, but you don't leave us many options. Answers, not attitude, is the name of the game tonight.
Why didn't you tell me you had all these fun playthings here already?
It's torture. Oh, no, it's not. Not yet, anyway. I'm gonna ask you nicely, one more time. Give up those diamonds.
So, it's gonna be one of those nights.
Jason, the theme of this episode is going to be surprises because my understanding is this film has something to do with surprises.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, surprise, there's a naked lady and I let you watch the movie. So tell us all, my understanding of the film was that it's sort of a mid-2000s knockoff of mid-90s crime drama, but the cast was so intriguing. Was I right to give you this movie as a little bit of a high five, maybe? Not necessarily a bad film, but kind of a fun film to talk about.
Yeah, definitely a fun film to talk about. I wouldn't say it's a high 5, but I wouldn't say it's a low 5 either. I would just say it's a 5.
Okay.
And that is such a perfect way to describe this film. It is a 5 out of 10, right? Because it is as average as a film can be, despite having some really above average pieces in play.
And also Noah Hathaway.
And Noah Hathaway, because Atreyu makes everything a mid, right? So, no, I wanted to start with talking about director Kern Saxton, whose name seems like it could have been on our bottom 5 worst names list as some kind of like jacked up rogue space hero. But the fact is, this guy has like almost no other credits. He's just done some short film work, one of which you mentioned on our last episode, Porntourage.
A webisode, I believe.
Whatever. I don't know.
Whatever webisodes are.
But he largely works in much shorter fare. Everything is low budget. And if I were to use his IMDb as tea leaves and sort of try to read into his career, I would say that Sushi Girl was this guy's big break back in 2012. And the reception of it left him picking up scraps for editing work for the next 10 years before he took the helm, sort of because he was co-director, for a segment of an anthology called Tales from the Other Side, which it looks like a low budget, like Trick or Treat. So this is where we've sort of wound up with Kern Saxton, and he probably deserved much more than he's gotten because Sushi Girl isn't a bad movie so much as it is truly a bland one. If it were a color, Mike, it would be beige. If it were a newspaper column, it would be the NASDAQ listings. If it were a food, it'd certainly not be sushi, but rather oatmeal. Not the kind with the brown sugar or the little apples, you know what I mean? Just oatmeal.
Cream of wheat.
Cream of wheat. This is the cream of wheat of cinema. But while it's bland, it isn't boring.
Oh, it's cream of wheat and whiskey. All right, cool.
A little bit, but not a good whiskey. Again, mid, right?
Okay.
So it's really hard to get across how weird this little flick is because it defies any kind of tidy categorization about why it doesn't work. It's fairly capably made. It has a decent screenplay. And the direction, while largely feeling like it's a one-act play that's been brought to the screen.
Yep.
That, too, is pretty competent.
It feels like the movie saw Reservoir Dogs and was like, ooh, I like that movie, and made this movie.
For those that have seen the movie, that's a really lazy criticism. The fact of the matter is, though, this movie doesn't have Tarantino-esque dialogue.
Sure.
It's not making tons of pop culture references. It's not super snappy. I feel as though this movie came out of a really, really cool concept, right? Just from the get-go. And that central premise is that it takes this cultural food art experience that the Japanese call Nyo Taimori, which translated means body sushi. And this movie poses a what if, okay? What if a woman covered in sushi, right? Because that's what Nyo Taimori is.
I'm listening.
What if a woman covered in sushi and is told to lie completely still, regardless of what happens around her? And then she bears witness not only to confessions of wrongdoing by a gang of ne'er-do-wells, but also then must stay statue still while they start playing out the post-heist violence of, let's say, Reservoir Dogs.
Well, this is unexpected. How subtle. I mean, the architecture's a little too Ming Dynasty, don't you think? Not exactly Japanese.
It's a work in progress.
And you have party favors. Which one of your goons picked her out? I did.
Literally a woman as a serving dish,
naked.
and she's covered in all of this sushi.
That's correct. She's a serving dish.
And so she is there, a real person.
Yeah.
Who has to lie completely still throughout whatever happens.
That's right. At the very beginning of the film, she's told by the person making the sushi, it's none other than Sonny Chiba.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's
so he's
cool.
handed this stack of money. And then you see him preparing all this sushi and placing it on this woman. And you hear this voiceover of, you must lie completely still, no matter what you hear, no matter what you see, no matter what happens around you. Because apparently somebody knows some shit's going down. I'm just going to say it right up front. It's a great set piece.
Yeah, sure.
Because you've got something really interesting at the center of all of these odd character dynamics.
This sounds bananas to even bring up, but it reminds me a little bit of Hitchcock's Rope.
Yeah, it's very similar where you have that center chest with the dead body inside of it and they're all walking around it. And in fact, this is a very similar film to Rope because this film plays out way more like Rope than it does like Reservoir Dogs.
Okay.
Although it gets into some violence and it gets into people pointing guns at each other and all of that. But the film doesn't feel at all like Reservoir Dogs. And I think that's both a credit to the film and a detriment to the film, because what happens with this kind of setup is apparently they had a whole bunch of camera guys because in the credits you could see 4 camera operators and the cameras were labeled A through D, which made it sound like it was a multi-camera shoot. And I think that there's a number of reasons for that. But when you do a multi-camera shoot like that, you're not lighting for a single shot. You're lighting the entire set in a very even way so that you can move the cameras all around.
Okay.
What that means is you get a very bland image. I wouldn't say that I lay the blame wholly at the feet of cinematographer Aaron Meister.
Oh, it's not secretly Roger Deakins this time?
Much like director Kern Saxton, Aaron Meester really hasn't done all that much.
Oh,
He's
we
done
were on
mostly
such
short
a
films.
nice streak.
I know we were on
okay.
a tear, but not this time. I mean, you're not going to find too many renowned directors of photography working on movies with a budget of $750,000. Now, the movie couldn't have used much of that for lighting, setup, costuming, set decoration, all of that. Because as you've mentioned in your setup for the film last week, and as we sort of made mention today, the money had to have been going into this cast list.
It's like a Comic-Con convention hall.
Yeah, it's sort of like a insane B-movie, low A movie, rogues gallery of talent. Right?
Yes.
You've got the original Candyman, Tony Todd. You've got, we mentioned him, Noah Hathaway, who played Atreyu in the Neverending Story and then didn't do anything really of note for a long time. And then, of course, you have Luke Skywalker himself, Mark freaking Hamill.
Right.
What's interesting is you also have to mention other, quote, big names like Michael Biehn of Aliens, The Terminator, and my beloved The Abyss.
Right.
The Lawnmower Man himself, Jeff Fahey.
Yeah.
And Danny Trejo, who we last saw on this podcast doing a bizarre Native American dance in The Crow Wicked Prayer.
This is like a film jitsu kind of movie, right?
And yet, we're still not done with the cast list. Kern Saxton also managed to get David Dastmalchian, right?
Right.
Who he hadn't really broken out yet into the, he's a fairly big name now after doing Late Night with the Devil and the Suicide Squad.
He's a darling of the horror scene for sure.
He really is. Yeah. Right. James Duval, who played the not Keanu nor Skeet Ulrich part of Miguel, the son of Randy Quaid in Independence Day.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Sonny Chiba, the legendary martial arts icon who somehow wound up here despite doing the Kill Bill movies only a decade or so earlier. But while all these people are in this movie, and they're all directed more or less capably and give you more or less what you expect from them, almost all, with the exception of the first three I mentioned, Tony Todd, Mark Hamill, and Noah Hathaway, are barely in this movie.
Okay.
And some of them, we're talking 1 minute of screen time, max.
Okay.
Right? For instance, Michael Biehn, he plays a security guard that's watching a monitor and then goes to investigate a suspicious vehicle in a loading dock alongside fellow guard Danny Trejo. What is that car? It's a plumbing van for Falcor Plumbing.
Oh, womp womp. Really? Okay. Yeah.
It's like everything in this movie. It's okay. Like, it's like, oh, that's sort of cute, but it's not funny either. It's mid. Everything about this, it's cream of wheat.
A wise man once wrote, I cannot see her tonight. I must give her up. So I will eat for good.
Wow. What a disappointment, because I was really hoping that this was going to be sort of over the top, kinetic. I was envisioning a little bit of a zany Mark Hamill doing
almost
more
like
of
a neon gun
thing.
fable kind of thing. Yeah.
I was hoping it seemed like the kind of thing that was just going to be fun, almost because it would have to be with this rogues gallery, as you put it, of that guys and some of our near and dear favorites.
None of the guys are the highlights of the film, despite Mark Hamill possibly doing the best work I've ever seen him do in front of the camera.
Whoa.
Yeah. No, look, I love the Star Wars movies, but I wouldn't call Hamill's performance in the original trilogy.
Yeah, I know.
The high point of those films.
No, if you're being honest, he was a kid. He wasn't a great actor. Right.
Hamill here, he plays this effeminate, weaselly sadist. And I really was impressed. But it wasn't him that made the film really memorable. It wasn't Tony Todd, whose quiet menace felt honestly more posed than threatening, like he was posturing. No, the highlight here is the titular character. Sorry, titular, I know. The Sushi Girl, played by actress model Courtney Palm. For the vast majority of the film, not only is Palm without dialogue, she's also without clothing.
Or movement, right?
Yeah. You see, that's the whole thing with the plot of this movie. You've got this fixed human being at the center of it that you sort of revisit periodically as tensions run high around her. And she's trying so hard not to react, and yet you can see her slightly react. There's some good work happening there. And she is maybe top 3 best looking women ever I've seen in a film. I mean, this woman, it's distractingly gorgeous, but she has some chops. She pulls off her scenes really well. She has only a few lines of dialogue in the entire thing. And as you can tell, I mean, the movie sort of hinges on her in many respects. And I want people to see this because I would love to hear what others think of Sushi Girl. I'm not going to talk about twists and plot points. I will say that there is this flourish of violence. It is a very violent movie. There's torture in the film that is particularly unsettling, despite the blandness of the way that the film is made. Noah Hathaway does a great job, maybe second to Hamill as far as acting goes. Just, it's he and Hamill that really steal the show overall. And I think that it's just unfortunate to me that Kern Saxton didn't have more money, more resources to make this film really sing. Because he had, at its core, a really good central concept. He also had this great idea with these big name, quote unquote, stars to utilize them in an almost triple or quadruple Drew Barrymore in Scream way. Because you see Michael Biehn show up and Danny Trejo show up and Jeff Fahey, and you're like, wait a minute. Whoa. Are we in like a whole other chapter of this film, only to see that their performances are very limited, and it's surprising. I think that were he to have more money, were it not a multi-camera shoot, but rather something that was more storyboarded and had a little more visual flair, a little Scorsese, a little something. It's bland in its pacing. It's bland in its shooting. And ultimately, it's a bland thing to watch, which is just so unfortunate because I really do think it's budgetary limitations that led to it.
Does it manage by the end to recover the idea of having this prone naked woman? Is this an exploitation thing? Is it relevant?
No.
Is it?
No, it's very relevant. It's extremely relevant. And nothing here is, even the nudity isn't exploitative. It's part of the scene.
I gotta say, I'm a little disappointed because I wasn't giving you the worst movie that I could find. I was hoping to give you something that was just a little over the top, a little excessive, a little manic. That's the way this seemed to me. I'm disappointed that that's not what you got.
No, let's put it this way. I was extraordinarily tired when I turned this film on, but for the most part, it held me. It's just that really it comes down to budgetary limitations and maybe like resources and stuff. So
did it miss the opportunity to use its limitation as its strength? The way that Hitchcock often would take the fact that he couldn't show certain things and turn that into a strength. Like,
I just don't think the filmmakers were talented enough to think that way. I think they were thinking like, we need to have this coverage in order to make the film, and not so much, if we compose this thing this way, we're going to have a more dynamic feel. There was nothing ever at a canted angle. Almost everything was like at an eye level.
Yep.
You know what? I love that you said rope. I was thinking 12 Angry Men.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because it does. But 12 Angry Men was a single camera shoot, and they did a lot of good framing, right?
Yeah.
Was that Elia Kazan? I can't remember.
Yep.
But I mean, it was just that cinematography in that room and the detail. This movie didn't have a lot of detail. It just had flat shots of people trying their best to act, and it never quite ratcheted up the tension enough.
Well, if there's one thing I know is that going cheap is never the best thing for a film. It's certainly not a good thing for sushi. So here we are. I'm glad that if one of us was going to eat some questionable cinematic sushi, that it was you instead of me. Thanks for taking the adventure anyway.
For Courtney Palm alone, I would have eaten the bad sushi.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Jason, for a conversation about a film called Sushi Girl,
Yeah.
it seemed only fitting that we would do our bottom 5 meals. Because whether you are eating sushi that has been sitting out on a lady while crime happens, or you are the lady who the meal is atop, either way, bottom 5 situations, I think.
I think so.
I wanted to do bottom 5 meals. I'm curious how you thought about your list.
Man, the first thought that I had when you said this was to include 1985's Reanimator on this list. Because, man, that was one gross meal when the decapitated but still alive head of Dr. Hill, played by David Gale, went down on the bound and naked Megan, played by the stunningly fetching Barbara Crampton. But then I realized that while it was positively awful for poor Megan, she was actually the meal in this case. And far be it for me to say Barbara Crampton's not tasty.
Right.
So I had to go back to the well because ultimately I wanted this bottom 5 not to be situational, or at least not entirely, but rather I wanted whatever was being eaten to be really, really gross.
Okay.
So that was my approach. Really gross meals.
Sure. I took a little bit of a blend of the two, I think. I'm excited about this bottom 5 because
me too.
So many of our stories focus on food, from the Last Supper to the first Thanksgiving. Think about our cinematic language, right? The role that food plays in cinema. Something like The Godfather, one of our greatest films, right? Cool Hand Luke's 50 hard-boiled eggs. The Devil's Tower made of mashed potatoes in Close Encounters.
Yeah.
Right?
Awesome.
Pulp Fiction's $5 milkshake. I guess my point is that food sometimes helps filmmakers tell their stories. Sometimes they use it to tell us something good, like I'll have what she's having, or sometimes it tells us something bad, which is how we arrive at bottom 5 meals.
Yeah.
My number 5 is pretty indisputable. It's a little bit of a blend of both of the things you were talking about, the situation and the food itself.
Sure, yeah.
It's here for obvious but also kind of complex reasons. I am going with Agent Paul Krendler being served his own brains by Hannibal Lecter in the 2001 sequel to The Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal, directed by Ridley Scott. It's a gruesome scene, right? He's captured and sedated Krendler and Clarice Starling, played this time by Julianne Moore. He's surgically removed the top of Krendler's skull at this fancy dinner table, cuts off a piece of his brain, sautés it up with some aromatics, and then feeds it to Krendler while Starling has to sit there and watch. Holy shit. So for the facts of the meal alone, it makes my bottom 5. But also, it's here because I think it's a bottom 5 in the fact that the existence of this film betrays the original. I've said it before. Yeah. I think The Silence of the Lambs is a near perfect film. It certainly didn't need a sequel that recast its lead actress and that offers a scene that, to me, presents us with almost a caricature of Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, we might hear a little bit more about Hannibal in a little bit, but we'll see about that. I'm going to go ahead and launch right into my bottom 5. I will say that in my bottom 5, I tried like hell not to do obvious ones. My number 5 is not at all obvious, and it's from 2021's Yes Day, directed by Miguel Arteta. It's a family comedy that stars Jennifer Garner and Edgar Ramirez as parents who decide they need to reconnect with their kids, and they decide to do so by declaring a yes day, which means they cannot say no to their 3 children all day long.
Okay, I know what this movie is. I think my wife watched it with the girls, I think.
I would imagine so. Okay. Yeah, it's cute. It's largely innocuous. It deals in like situational comedy, like what would happen if the kids say they want to drive the family minivan through a car wash with the windows down.
Gotcha.
About midway through the film, the parents have to grant their kids the wish to eat, for breakfast no less, the most horrendously audacious and huge ice cream treat. This side of like a Carvel ice cream cake, maybe topped with a hot brownie with just whipped cream and cherries. Blueberries, I think, are in there.
Oh, wow.
It's called the Gut Buster.
Oh,
and if the family eats every bite of this cloyingly sweet slop, they get the whole thing for free and won't have to pay the full price of $40. So at first, the whole family, including oldest daughter Jenna Ortega, participate, but soon they're all repulsed and in food comas, except for Edgar Ramirez's dad character, who is the last man standing and is eating about 6 servings of ice cream by himself.
Gross.
In under just a few minutes. He had to beat the clock to do it. As a person who is lactose intolerant, this is absolutely a gastronomical nightmare of the highest order. Apparently, their dad is in similar straits because after he takes the last bite, he immediately runs to the restroom like a pin was pulled from a grenade in his stomach and he was trying to save his family. Now, the rule is you cannot vomit or else you'll have to pay. But a random patron follows him into the restroom and then proudly reemerges, announcing,
"He didn't throw up! He didn't throw up! It came out the other end!"
Everything about this is positively awful, including all the horrific sounds coming from the bathroom and the fact that someone followed him in to hear it all and then report to the entire restaurant that a giant shit hath been taken.
That's okay. Yeah. You had me going on Fudgy the Whale there for a second. You guys, that's like old school New England, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
You had me thinking about Fudgy the Whale, and then you immediately ruined it. Well, I promise, Jay, that my number 4 is the last horror movie on my list.
Oh, okay.
But I cannot let it go by unaddressed. I am going with the Chinese restaurant dinner the adult version of the Losers Club has in the original It miniseries. Can we just talk about this meal for a minute? In fact, let's talk about what this meal is before an intergalactic evil fucks it all up. Okay, can we just do that? Yeah. 6 of the losers have returned to Derry for the first time in 27 years. And apparently you just can't fight evil space clowns without first having the biggest goddamn Chinese food feast in the history of anything. They don't eat this much Chinese food in China. Jay, this enormous banquet table is covered in every imaginable platter of everything you could find on a Chinese menu. It's like the 85 bears are coming over for dinner and they brought their appetite. No one orders a side dish of anything. They just opened the menu and pointed at it and said, "We'll take one." I was also thinking about this poor backwater Maine restaurant must have had to call like a 4-alarm fire for reinforcements to come and cook this much goddamn food for 6 people on a random Tuesday. True.
Oh, man.
And I haven't even really gotten to the bottom 5 part yet. No. That comes at the end when they try to open the fortune cookies and oopsies, your cookies are haunted. Pennywise has fucked with their fortunes, and instead of lucky numbers, they get living eyeballs and fetal birds and a cockroach. Yeah. And one of them just explodes blood in Beverly's face all
it's like
over
a
the
David
place.
Lynch nightmare.
But the bottom 5-ness of it all, Jay, doesn't even end there. Oh no.
My God.
Because there's another dirty detail. Who gets stuck with the bill for this Super Bowl-sized dinner? Mike Hanlon.
Oh, yeah.
The guy who's making $28,000 a year at the library is picking up the tab. He does that like, "No, guys, I insist," right? And they just let him do it. It is half that man's salary to pay for this meal, and they just let him do it. Jay, if you ordered a wheelbarrow full of Mushu pork and washed it down with a 55-gallon drum of scorpion bowl and then stuck me with the bill, I would lure you into the sewers myself just to make sure that a clown ate your inconsiderate ass. So
oh God,
that's it for me. This whole dinner is fucked.
It really is.
It's my number
I love
4.
that you worked in the situational aspect of Mike paying, because that's so true.
Oh,
good call.
Yeah.
Really good call.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you stuck with the miniseries too, because the Chapter 2 version of that dinner,
yeah.
just awful.
Yeah.
The CG.
Yeah. I
man.
specifically was like, no, not that. This.
Not that one.
Yeah.
This one. Yeah. Good. Good choice.
Thank you, sir.
Well, my number 4 is probably the most well-known out of all of mine. And while I tried desperately not to go with these well-known cinematic meals, I couldn't shy away from including this one because as of this year, it is a 100-year-old cinematic meal.
Wow.
I'm talking Charlie Chaplin's Little Tramp and Max Wayne's Big Jim in 1925's The Gold Rush, eating a boiled work boot as if it were a fish fillet.
That's so good.
Deveined of its shoelaces and with a sole full of pins that look like fish bones, Chaplin gives Swain the top of the shoe, which he cautiously eats as if it were the skin. Chaplin himself dines on the hard bottom of the boot.
That's so good.
And pulls meat from the pins. It's both whimsical and gross, a bit of phantasmagoric pantomime that has been among the most loved scenes Chaplin ever committed to film. And while all that may be true, and the scene is old comedy gold, it's also 2 starving men eating a shoe. It's the film that Chaplin stated he wanted to be most remembered as making, and honestly, that may well be the case, if for no other reason than because of this desperate and terrible meal. So, at number 4, The Gold Rush from 1925.
This is why you're so much better at having a podcast than I am, because I thought about the Gold Rush for completely different reasons. And the dinner roll scene, where he's kind of doing like the dance routine with the dinner rolls.
Yeah.
That was what came to mind. I was thinking about food in movies, and I thought about him doing that really great dance routine.
Right.
But the boot never popped into my mind. And God, it's such a good pick. This is why you're better at this than I am. I'm just having a laugh at the funny dinner rolls and just blew right past the brilliant selection available in the same film.
I like the funny dinner roll sequence better.
Yeah. Oh, it's
personally.
funny. Sure.
But when you're talking bad meals, they ate a friggin' shoe. Apparently it was made of licorice.
Oh, cool.
And apparently he ate quite a few.
Is it black
they took
licorice?
a lot of takes. Yeah.
Oh, then it's a bottom 5 meal. That's fucking disgusting. I'd rather eat a boot.
Oh, man. Don't tell Justin Santo that.
No, that's, you know what? Come at me, bro. I'd rather eat a boot. I'd rather eat a 100-year-old boot. Okay, Jay, my number 3. Now we're getting into the stuff.
Okay.
I said no more horror films. I meant it.
All right.
But this pick is from a meal that is absolutely terrifying. From Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards. I'm going with the strudel and fresh cream restaurant scene. In this scene, we have Shoshana, this young Jewish woman, sitting at a restaurant with Christoph Waltz's Nazi Colonel Hans Landa. Landa is the officer that ordered the death of Shoshana's whole family on their dairy farm when she was a little girl before she escaped into the countryside. The audience knows this. Shoshana knows this. What we don't know is whether Colonel Hans Landa knows this. This is already a bottom 5 situation, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Then Tarantino ratchets the tension even more when Landa realizes that he hasn't ordered the fresh cream to spread on the strudel, which he insists is a must. And the subtext, of course, is that Shoshana's family ran the dairy farm.
Oh, Jesus.
And so his insistence on cream, is it a scare tactic to let her know that she's caught? Or is he honestly just ordering strudel with cream? This meal is claustrophobic. It's scary. Rewatching it the other day, I was struck by how relevant it is as we live in a time when people are being swept off the streets and whisked away to mass detention camps by people like Hans Landa, who are just doing their job. Right. So for deeply cinematic reasons, and maybe even for some more important real life reasons, this meal is my number 3.
Wow, man. I'm terrified to know what your number 2 and number 1 are.
They're tough.
Inglourious Bastards is one of those movies where I feel like it has some of Tarantino's highest highs and lots of his lowest lows.
Sure, I can see that.
It is the most bipolar of all of his films.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. Well, my number 3 is definitely nothing like yours. I've seen this movie at least a dozen times, probably as much as 24 times. And every time I see 1984's The Neverending Story, I am caught off guard when Bastian's dad, played by none other than Major Dad himself, Gerald McRaney, prepares himself a tasty, quick breakfast treat of a glass of orange juice blended with a fucking raw egg. What the shit? Every time I see this, I can't pay attention to whatever the hell McRaney's widower is saying to his still mourning son about getting over his mom's death, because why is he drinking orange juice with a raw egg?
I'm laughing so hard because I know that this has been like nauseating you for as long as I've known you. You were like, hi, my name's Jason Santo. That scene in Neverending Story is really fucking
Most people are afraid of Gmork, that demon wolf creature.
Nope.
And then like others are afraid of the Nothing, which represents adulthood and the death of imagination it brings. I am horrified and scarred by dear old dad's breakfast routine and how he doesn't even flinch while he guns it down like a glass of water.
Yeah, like it's not totally psychotic to be drinking orange juice and a raw egg. I love that we finally found like a formal way for you to air this grievance. You're like, after all these years. And on a movie with Noah Hathaway in it, no less. Look at that.
I know, right? Like the tie back in. You got the Tarantino tie-in, and I got the Hathaway. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to reel us right back into tragedy here with my number 2.
Jesus.
This one is a heartbreaker. It could have easily been my number 1. A film that reached into my chest and pulled out my heart. An animated film from Studio Ghibli. It's Isao Takahata's Grave of the Fireflies.
Nope. I'm noping right out of this one.
Right. Yeah.
Nope.
Right.
I think I blocked it, to be perfectly honest.
Okay. So what the movie is about, of course, is the consequences of the incendiary bombs in Japan during World War II. We get Seita and Setsuko, who are these siblings just trying to survive as they're orphaned and starving in Japan. They spend a little bit of time living with an aunt who can't really support them. But really, these kids are out on their own as money and food are running out. And it's a gut-wrenching, beautiful, vital film where we can see what's happening way before the characters can accept it themselves. And it culminates as we watch sweet little Setsuko slowly dying of malnutrition. And it ends with a meal where Seita brings Setsuko some food that he scrounged together, and he gives her a watermelon that is far too little, far too late. And the poor little girl, lying on a mat, hallucinating, manages a couple of bites of this melon as Seita tries to prepare the rest of the food. And then she just closes her eyes and slips away. And this poor little child dies of starvation with a mouthful of food. And I can't even talk about it without wanting to cry. I can see you on our screen having a moment because it's that,
I can't,
right?
I just can't believe you even evoked that one.
Yeah.
Like on our stupid show.
It was one of the first.
Oh my God. Like I have stayed away from that film. I've stayed away from thinking about that film. People talk about Threads or The Day After.
Sure.
No, nothing is as emotionally crippling. Maybe Saving Private Ryan's Storming the Normandy Beach
but it's in that
scene.
category, right?
It is that the whole film. You said it so well. The audience knows ahead of the characters understanding themselves.
The writing's all over the wall.
Oh my God, Mike! It is so harrowing.
But I don't want this description to turn somebody away from watching it because I truly believe every human should put this film in their heart and carry it with them for the rest of their lives.
Right, exactly.
But for me, the reason why this is not my number 1 is because I've only seen it one time and I'm sure I'll never be able to watch it ever again. Yeah. Right. Yeah, but everybody should absolutely see Grave of the Fireflies at least once in their life. even if it's a bottom 5 meal, because for me, it's a top 5 human experience.
Sure.
But absolutely, that meal belongs on this list.
It's the right choice. I would have never remembered it. I honestly think I blocked most of that film. So,
yeah.
Well, power to you for getting through that description. That's tough stuff.
Yeah.
Mine is also tough, but tough in a black humor sort of way. Somehow, this isn't the grossest one on my list, and that's saying so very much. So very, very much. I mentioned this film in even this dinner scene when we did our bottom 5 rooms on the disappointment room episode. But damn it, Mike, I cannot do this list without mentioning the horror show that is The Captain's Dinner in 2022's Triangle of Sadness.
I still haven't seen it.
This is truly one of the most repulsive meal scenes in all of cinema. But despite all the vomiting and shitting and whatever other horrible excretions permeate this scene, it's the fact that the crew was ordered by a rich, entitled passenger to stop whatever it was that they were doing and join the hoi polloi whilst they frolicked the afternoon away in the warm Grecian Sea. Well, what a lot of these crew members were doing was preparing food for the captain's dinner. And despite the warning that the food would spoil, a Russian oligarch's wife gets what a Russian oligarch's wife wants.
Listeria.
Every crew member goes swimming, and the prepared meal, while looking lovely, ends up coupling with the raging sea's waves to render almost every passenger on board with the worst case of stomach upset this side of yesterday's Gutbuster. It's awful. Thank Christ smell-o-vision didn't become a thing, because I bet director Ruben Östlund would have gone there. Ugh. Ghastly all around, and firmly at my number 2, Triangle of Sadness.
It reminds me of, you talked about honorable mentions. I hope I'm not spoiling anything for you. It's not on my list, but I thought about the blueberry pie scene from Stand By Me.
Oh, hell yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what this evokes for me. But it sounds like we take that blueberry pie scene and make it everybody at the contest. No, thank you.
That's exactly what it's like. But then picture it like with all the dishes and everything rolling and the whole ship just swaying back and forth. Oh my God. But you're right. I mean, it is that kind of thing, like the Stand By Me scene. Yeah.
What's the line from Weird Science? What is it? A
nice greasy pork sandwich served in a dirty ashtray.
Yeah. Oh, woof. Oh boy. That's a tough one. Well, my number 1 isn't that gross. It isn't eating your own brains. It's also not the world's most expensive demon cookies, but it is the first thing that came to mind for my list. And it's honestly not as bottom 5-y as something like Grave of the Fireflies, but I gave it the 1 spot because it's definitely not as maybe niche as some of my other picks. This is a shared cultural experience. I'm going with a scene from a Best Picture winner. The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King.
Okay.
It's the cherry tomato dinner scene where Denethor, who is the steward of Gondor, sits in his grand hall devouring this meal as he's ordered his son to ride out to his death.
Yeah.
It's pretty infamous in the trilogy, right? He's lost his marbles due to the grief of his son Boromir dying, his despair over this massive army that's coming his way. He's basically gone mad. He's ordered his son and his men to ride out into a battle where they are greatly outnumbered and certain to die. Everybody knows it, but he does it anyway. And there's this big emotional scene where the condemned soldiers ride out of the city. And then the film cuts back and forth between the soldiers and Denethor, who sits in his grand hall devouring his food like a wild dog. And he demands that Pippin sings him a song. And Pippin sings this haunting Celtic-style lament called The Edge of Night.
Mist and shadow, cloud and shade, all shall fade,
the editing here is brilliant because this moment shows how detached he is from reality, juxtaposed with Pippin's mournful singing and intercut with the soldiers charging into death while the father feasts. I think it's honestly a commentary on the tragedy and senselessness of war. The whole thing culminates in a moment where the arrows rain down on the soldiers, but rather than see them die, we get this close-up of Denethor bursting this cherry tomato that drips all down his chin like blood, which Peter Jackson uses brilliantly as a stand-in for the blood spilled on the battlefield. Yeah. It's so impactful and so much more effective than if we'd actually seen the soldiers get massacred. But the other reason that I love it so much is that the scene pulls us right out of all the fun, large-scale fantasy spectacle that we've been seeing over 2.5 movies. There aren't dragons or magic or elves here. It strips all that away and forces us to sit at the table for a few mournful minutes in the bloodshed and the tragedy of a world at war. And the audience suffers the human cost of this epic while simply sitting at a table eating a meal. For me, it might honestly be the best scene in the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. But for all that it is and all that it represents, it's a bottom 5 meal in the very best way possible.
I can think of no other scene that is as singularly awful and completely insane as your number 5. The ending dinner scene in 2001's Hannibal.
It's your number 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, I agree. An inferior sequel in every way. Hannibal did have this one horrifically memorable ace up its sleeve.
Yeah. Yeah.
This moment when Clarice wakes up after being abducted and drugged by Lecter and finds herself in this incredibly low-cut dress at a dinner table where sitting at the head of the table is an apparently also very drugged Paul Krenler, played by Ray Liotta. Now, Krenler is a sleazy Justice Department official who tried to leverage his influence to save Starling's career as she ran a botched drug raid that lost right. Sorry. I guess I was just trying to avoid describing the scene in this movie when Anthony Hopkins' Hannibal Lecter skips the fava beans and Chianti and replaces liver with Krenler's brains. And then, after using a scalpel, as you said, to remove, his scalp, right? Scalpel.
Yeah.
He trims out a piece of the man's brain and literally cooks it up directly in front of Liotta's sleepy-eyed villain before feeding it to him. He feeds a dude his own brain. How this ended up at number 5 on your list blows me away. This one with a bullet right to the top of my list, without a doubt, because not only have the movie makers lost their minds, they've fried them as well.
Now, Jason, I told you that we were going to have some Sushi Girl surprises along the way.
Yeah. You got me a Sushi Girl?
I did not, but boy, you're going to wish you hadn't said that in a minute because here's the thing. When we're talking about bottom 5 meals, right? Only one of us has a sister that is a professional chef that has appeared on a Gordon Ramsay cooking show on national television.
Yeah.
And so the only fitting thing that I could think to do was to reach out to that person and ask her to give us her bottom 5 meals.
Oh, cool.
Hello, hi. It is me, Jay's sister.
Oh my
Amber.
God.
I'm a chef and therefore uniquely qualified to comment on movie meals and which ones are ostensibly the worst. So my bottom 5, I would say, starts with the candy spaghetti covered in syrup from Elf. It literally makes me sick looking at it, and that is saying something because I'm actually not that picky. Next would be the deflated turkey scene in Christmas Vacation. Just like the sinewy, fibrous, it really makes me itchy to see a turkey look that way. Next, I'll go with monkey brains from Temple of Doom, simply because I feel like perhaps we shave the monkey's head a little. I just think there would be a transfer of fur to the brain, and I find that unappetizing at best. Next would be when you're trying to eat some nice takeout rice and it turns into maggots, such as happened in The Lost Boys. That is upsetting to me, as takeout Chinese is my very favorite thing on earth. And last but not least, should we call it a meal? It's the human wishbone from Bone Tomahawk. And if you've seen that scene, you've never been the same since. So that is my top 5, bottom 5 worst meal experiences in a movie. Over and out.
Man, that's awesome. Man, my sister rocks. What a great list.
As a matter of fact, I had to amend my list after she sent it to me because it turns out Amber and I are very much on the same wavelength. But thanks to Amber for dropping us her bottom 5. Go out and check out season 1 of Gordon Ramsay's Next Level Chef. Amber was awesome in the show. And that, sir, is our first Sushi Girl surprise of the episode.
Okay.
Jay, surprise number 2 of this episode. Usually this is where we would do dueling double bill, but we're not gonna.
Oh, okay.
I'm calling an audible.
Okay.
We are going to do a pick 2, kick 2 here because Sushi Girl stars Tony Todd.
Okay.
Who we lost recently. I think I've decided this is how we're going to deploy pick 2, kick 2. When we lose somebody,
memorial,
we're gonna do pick 2, kick 2 to talk about some of their films. This is what I would like to do instead of dueling double bill. Surprise! We're going to do pick 2, kick 2 Tony Todd films.
Okay, sounds good.
Here we go. We are gonna go with Platoon, Candyman, The Rock.
Yep.
And 1990s Night of the Living Dead.
Well, it's easy for me.
It's easy for you?
I'm walking right out of that one. Yeah.
Okay.
If we're talking performances, it's super easy.
Okay.
He was terrific. And I said it on the show before. In Night of the Living Dead, he was fantastic. I said it to him and he beamed. He lit up because he loved hearing that. I meant it when I said it to him. I meant it when I said it on the show. That's an easy one for me.
Okay.
And then I want to know what your first pick is going to be.
For me, it's going to be Candyman.
Right.
I think for both performance and for the film itself. I think I must have talked about this movie on the show before, but I love this film. I think it's great cinema that happens to be very scary. But Tony Todd, I think, it has sort of all of his powers on display here. He's a classically trained actor. This is a movie that asked him to play a dramatic, tragic character that is also scary. He does everything that he's asked to do in this movie and more. It's a capital F film. It is not just some low rent slasher the way it sometimes gets maligned as. He's excellent in the movie. And so, for me, Candyman is an easy stash.
Yeah. Bernard Rose directed Candyman.
He did. Yeah.
And it has such a different stylistic vibe. That's what's wrong with Sushi Girl.
Yeah.
It's missing that flair behind the camera.
Okay. Yeah.
It's also missing the commitment that Tony Todd had to his performance. In Sushi Girl, he's listed as an executive producer. I have a feeling that he got that credit and maybe a sandwich and some, some cheap coffee. But in Candyman, he is divine.
I am the writing on the wall, the whisper in the classroom. Without these things, I am nothing. So now I must shed innocent blood. Come with me.
I remember him in Platoon only a bit. He's not a major role. He's a supporting role. And I remember seeing Todd in it and thinking to myself, damn, he had a very naturalistic performance that was so different than the way he was in Candyman that it shows that the man could act, that he's truly an actor. He doesn't bring the same thing to every one of his roles. I loved him in The Rock.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he was awesome.
That's the one I'm keeping for A handful of reasons. One,
okay.
The Rock is one of my absolute go-to comfort movies. One of my oldest favorite jokes. In high school when this movie came out, we had rented it at my best friend's house.
Yeah.
His cousin TJ comes over, picks up the case. Now on the spine, of course, they had the title, but for alphabetizing reasons, it was Rock, the, right?
Sure.
His cousin picks it up and asks us all, what is the movie Rock, the? And we have never let him live it down.
Oh my God. That's going to be on his tombstone.
Oh my God. It's been
Rock the.
It's been 20 years and I'm still talking about it to you right now. Also, 2 years ago at Salem Horror Fest, where they were screening Candyman, Tony Todd was the guest of honor. He came, he sat through a Q&A and then took off, wasn't going to sit around through the movie. I happened to bump into him at a cocktail bar in Salem, Massachusetts. And I look up on the TV and what happens to be on the television in the bar, just because, was The Rock. And now I have to sit there and go like, do I tell him? I did. I kind of gave him like a nudge and a point. And he was like, oh, look at that. He got excited. He took a picture of it on the TV. I guess he thought it was funny. He was a sweetheart of a guy. And at the end of the night, the Candyman's cocktail glass was still out in the bar. And I snagged it and I brought it home for my DVD shelf. So here on my DVD shelf is my copy of Candyman with Tony Todd's cocktail glass.
Mike's going to try to like clone him.
You know what? I could. And you'll all be thankful when I do because Tony Todd was one of the best. So I'm keeping Candyman and Rock the.
Okay.
As much as Night of the Living Dead and Platoon are great flicks.
Yeah, and I'm keeping Night of the Living Dead and Candyman. Mike, I think it's time we took a little trip. Not to some far-off fantasy land or dystopian future, but to the not-so-distant past. A past you and I, actually lived through. A time of boy bands, dial-up modems, and people earnestly thinking that the world was going to end because their computers would forget what century it was. That's right, Mike. We're heading straight into the dumbest apocalypse that never happened, the year 2000. And who better to guide us through this disaster that wasn't than the 2024 cinematic nostalgia bomb known as Y2K. A movie that doesn't just remember the era, it cranks it up to 11, pours Ecto Cooler all over it, and then sets it on fire. And because Y2K makes the past look even worse than it actually was, our bottom 5 will be bottom 5 period pieces.
Oh.
Celebrating those movies that tried to capture an era and instead accidentally set it on fire, much like your family's Y2K emergency generator that you never had to use. So dust off your Nokia brick phone and prepare yourself, Mike, because you're watching Y2K.
Oh, this is, you know what? This is like your Coyote Ugly gone right. This is what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the worst movie I've seen in the past 15 years.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, the worst movie Jason Santo has seen in the past 15 years.
I would swear by
that
it.
That is
yeah.
saying so much. I have never actually been worried about watching a movie for the show before until you just added that qualifier. That is terrifying to me.
Yeah, I really didn't like this.
Well, I can't wait to also really not like this. I hope that everybody will come back to find out exactly how much I didn't like this for our next episode, where I guess I'm going to watch Y2K and we're going to talk about our bottom 5 period
pieces. Yeah.
But until then, we have been your hosts. I am Mike.
And I am Jay.
And we'll see you next time.
Stalno mislim na te, hoću znat sve karte, vježbat ću sate i sate. Karate, vježbat ću dok zadnji mi kjaj zostane izađe.
Your introductions are so much better than mine.
Oh, are they really?
Yes, because you have something to say, and I'm always just like, shibbity dib the movie.
like the shibbity-doo.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it goes. That's how I'm going to do it today. So just fucking watch it.
Excellent. I love shibbity-doo.